Along with individual experts, Surgeon Masters brings you life improvement strategies in 10 minutes. These proven principles and strategies are easy to learn and can be applied immediately, allowing you to practice your best. Here's your host, Jeff Smith.
On this episode of the Surgeon Masters mini podcast, I have with me Dr. Brad Block, an otolaryngologist at ENT and Allergy Associates on Long Island, and also the host of the podcast, The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks a lot for having me, Jeff.
So, Brad, tell me a little bit about what's your mission and what's your goal in your podcast and helping doctors.
So it started off, my mission was helping myself. I've been podcasting at this point for almost 6 years, and I was looking for a podcast and it didn't exist at the time. Had yours been around, I probably wouldn't have started my own. But the goal was to help me communicate better with my patients because I was having trouble keeping up with my schedule and staying on time. And so I looked into communications experts that would be able to help me. And they were for dating or lawyers or salespeople, but really no one in the physician space, or at least no one that was there with an eye on efficiency as well, not just being able to communicate effectively, but effectively and efficiently. And so I created the podcast, and the topics kind of exploded from there. And so I cover everything, to steal from Ted Lasso, trying to help physicians be the best versions of ourselves in and out of the exam room. So I cover really anything from personal finance to parenting, of all things. And then still with really the eye mostly or a lot on optimizing that doctor-patient interaction, optimizing patient satisfaction.
Well, that's fantastic. And I might be able to record a podcast with you, get some dating advice or family advice from you. But let's focus on the optimizing the patient encounter, because there's kind of a couple perspectives there. Like there's definitely we would love it to be efficient. What do you think the ways of accomplishing that are?
There's what we want out of it, and there's what the patient wants out of it. We want to get the information that we need in order to arrive at a diagnosis, and they want to be heard. So how do we make both of those things happen efficiently? And so, from speaking to experts over the years, I've come up with these little tips and tricks that can help us be more efficient about it. One example would be like noticing the patient's eye color, right? And so you walk into the room, you've got your face in your computer, or, you're getting ready to do your exam. Have you really looked at the patient? And so I got this from an expert who wrote a book, how to get people to like you in 90 seconds or less. And so one of his tips was notice their eye color. And then if you haven't done that, have you really looked them in the eye long enough to really make them feel seen? So how long does that take? A couple of extra seconds? But those couple of extra seconds go a long way. Now hold it for more than a couple of extra seconds and you're creepy. So that's why it's very methodical, right? Like notice their eye color and then that's enough. And now they feel seen. Once they feel seen, they're more likely to feel heard. And then for us, that's beneficial because the visit is more likely to be efficient because they feel like you care about them as a person. They feel like you understand them. And in the same vein, noticing something about them, notice something that they're wearing, something they brought in with them, something on their keychain, something on their shirt, their earrings, just something. Even if you just like what I do now is, because we're recording this at the end of June, hey, do you have any summer plans? Before we even get into the history or after we've gotten to the history and, if I'm doing my physical exam, do you have any summer plans? Hey, those are cool, fluffy shoes that you're wearing. Something that tells them that you recognize that they're not just the sum of their symptoms, but they're a person too. Again, takes a few seconds, but goes a long way to building that rapport so they recognize that you see them as a complete person and not just their symptoms.
That's fantastic. And what you're highlighting is that there's simple steps for even the surgeon that feels a bit resistant in the sense of like overwhelmed. Like you're giving them ways to do this in a very efficient, short manner, but still having the patient feel seen and heard.
Yeah.
How about a couple more?
So one is, I'm sure this happens in your field, it happens in my field. Sometimes they end up perseverating on a symptom that you don't think is a big deal. You don't quite understand why they're here. You're kind of stuck and you thought you reassured them and yet still they're not ready to leave. They're not ready to get up and go because you haven't accomplished what they were hoping you would accomplish. And so a big question that I've asked is, well, what bothers you about this? What worries you about this? And I call it the question behind the question. Because like I have patients come in with something called a globus sensation, which is they feel like there's a lump in their throat. And so you have some patients that are like, oh, this is just an annoying sensation. I want it to go away. And you have another patient who's like, I just want to make sure that this isn't throat cancer. And unless you've said this isn't throat cancer, they're going to go home. Well, did he check for throat cancer? So unless you ask that question, well, what worries you about this? You're giving them permission because they might not say it. They might feel really anxious about it and yet judged if they say that, right? They're like 22, never smoker, right? Like they don't have the risk factors. Now, HPV is a risk factor for that, but we tend not to see it in people that young. So they might not say it. But if you can get it out of them, again, they feel more satisfied and the visit moves along for you. So the question behind the question, what is it that's bothering you about this? What about this symptom is worrying you?
Yeah, that's fantastic. You could take that behind every symptom and its relevance to the patient, because we sometimes just assume, well, that's not a big deal. And instead of inquiring what it is about them, it is to them that would make it a big deal, right? So great. Question behind the question. Great stuff. I mean, there's a lot of little pearls here in getting a better connection with our patients.
I've got one more if we have time for it.
Absolutely.
So the last one is humor. You can learn to be funny. If you don't think you're funny, it can still be a learned behavior. Carol Dweck's growth mindset. You can be funnier. You can't, maybe not the funniest person, but a little funnier than you are now. So you can try to bring humor, but there's a rule to abide by that I learned from someone that I interviewed on my show, which is the goal of humor is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. So as long as you're within those confines, you're really making a safe joke. It might not be a good joke. So if it's a bad joke, you can save it with something like, okay, I'll stick to being a surgeon. You don't have to worry about me going on tour and not being able to take care of you postoperatively, but just stick within those confines, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. So the afflicted is clearly the patient. They can never be the butt of your joke. But the healthcare system, the electronic medical record, you can even joke about yourself as long as it's not a dig at your skills that's going to make them lose faith in your abilities. But anyone who's in a position of power is someone that or something that you can make the joke about. Another way to make a joke is you can build a joke based on contrast. And so everything in medicine is very serious. So if you can somehow be silly as a contrast to that seriousness, but that can also be funny. It's like Abbott and Costello. There was the serious one and the silly one. And that contrast is really what brought about a lot of the humor. So those are just some tips for making jokes.
Well, and it's great opportunity with those 4 and probably thousands more if they want to listen to the Physician's Guide to Doctoring podcast and capture some more great tips, great opportunity. The common theme that you're sort of driving home, help us bring it all back.
It's help the patient feel seen and heard and valued. And there are ways to do that systematically that won't slow you down. And I would argue in many ways can speed you up. And so they want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, they want to feel valued. So if you can do those things with little turns of phrases that you can use over and over, they're going to love it. And then you're actually going to enjoy practicing medicine more.
Thanks so much, Brad, for being our guest.
Thanks for having me.
There you have it. In less than 10 minutes, this is Jeff Smith along with Dr. Brad Block. Until the next episode of Life Improvement Strategies for the Surgeon Who Wants More. Ciao.
Now, take 10 minutes and put your plan into action to practice your best.